Warmly welcome you to the second episode of my podcast, Demystify Biometrics. This video podcast is designed for product teams where I conduct interviews with researchers and practitioners on various topics in the field of biometrics. About today's topic, in this introductory segment of our Biometric Identification System series, we are going to focus on the first step, which is the biometric data acquisition. To simplify, we will divide this topic into two sections, which include selecting the appropriate hardware device and creating a suitable capture experience. We are fortunate to have Matthew Knott, a former group product manager from Idemia, sharing his extensive experience and insights on these topics. Welcome, Matthew.
Thank you, Ashok. Happy to be here.
Awesome. When we go through TSA security in the airport, the agent will usually scan a driver's license to verify its authenticity. The software used for this is typically provided by Idemia, a global leader in biometric identification. Idemia has the largest enrollment portfolio in the world for private businesses and governments, and also creates biometric scanning hardware and advanced matching algorithms. Some of you might be familiar with its former names, Morpho, Saffron, and MorphoTrust. Matthew is an expert in the field of biometric identity software, having led a team that managed 7 SaaS-based biometric products for civil and government markets. His team integrated these products with over 25 biometric devices that support various types of scanning, including iris, contactless fingerprints, palm scanning, and facial recognition. They also integrated with over 20 API third-party software ERP systems and data warehouses across the country. Wow, that was quite a mouthful. What an achievement, Matthew. Thank you for carving time to speak and share your experience with us. We really appreciate it. Could you give us a 60-second pitch of your career journey?
Sure. So I spent some time initially in sales and operations management prior to moving into product management. And during the last 8 years of product, I've worked in various industries, including consulting, e-commerce, biometrics, and then ad technology. My time in biometrics was, as you mentioned, spent at Idemia, about a year there, leading the live scan portfolio, so including a group of products, 7 of them, 5 of which are legacy, current generation, and next generation.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. All right. So with that, let's dive right into the topics. And my first question to you is, biometric hardware devices have obviously become quite advanced nowadays. And I'm sure you have been involved in the development of some of these devices. Can you briefly provide an overview of the evolution of these devices and how they have adapted to meet the market and consumer demands?
Yeah, so I've worked closely with the product manager for Idemia that develops these devices. I was his quote unquote main customer, especially here in the United States. And I've seen, as I mentioned, several legacy deployments, which had older hardware devices as well. And some of my customers also still use regular old fingerprint cards and ink. So I've kind of got the whole spectrum in my experience there. I would say that when these devices first came out, they were fairly low resolution, the digital devices, that is, fairly low resolution, took quite a long time to get an enrollment done. They were quite large, and they were also very, very, very expensive. I would say, as you would expect for a lot of technology, over time, those devices have gotten smaller. They've gotten physically lighter as well, which is a factor when we're talking about mobile enrollments and passport checks. And they've also gotten lower cost and increased the quality of your scans. So overall, we've got a great trend going here, and that's set to continue. You know, I can't talk too much about next generation solutions, but you can expect things to be much thinner and much lighter to go into mobile devices and things of that sort, and also to have a continually slight lowering of cost as we move forward.
Absolutely. I mean, technology, we have all seen that has definitely help reduce the cost of some of these hardware devices. Size has gone down, and we'll continue to see that trend going forward. Absolutely makes sense. Thank you for sharing that. My next question is, related to hardware devices is user experience. And it's important to consider the user experience since it's the first thing that users interact with. As hardware devices have evolved, it is likely that software has also advanced. Earlier this year, to give you an example, earlier this year in February, when I visited India, I went to a nearby post office to apply for my Aadhaar card. While waiting for my turn, I observed some of the individuals struggling to provide their fingerprints, and that is likely because there was a dust on the scanners and other environmental factors. I've also witnessed individuals having difficulty scanning their faces, moving their heads left, right, providing samples for different modalities. Based on your experience, can you share your thoughts on the current state of user experience for modalities?
Yeah, there's a long and short answer. I'd say that the short answer is our current user experience is okay. It's enough to continue, capturing enrollments and making records, but it's certainly not good, and it's certainly not what we expect from a lot of other software or even hardware that we interact with on a daily basis in 2023. So we're not quite up to our standards, in my opinion. And that is broken down into two sections, right? You have your hardware, and then you have your software component as well. Hardware components is, I would say, heavily affected by the operator as well, right? So you have a lot of training, development, and actual manipulation of biometrics, or I should say fingers and things like that on the scanner itself. And so that takes training, that takes knowledge. It also takes maintenance. You have to clean the devices, as you mentioned. They can get dusty. Mostly it's actually the oils from your fingers that get smeared all over the screens. And they can also have issues with dry hands is another very, very common issue. So for at least for my customers that were having issues with that, we would tell them, hey, get a bottle of lotion, put it next to the fingerprint scanner. And, even if somebody doesn't want it, then that's going to be probably your easiest solution is just have them slather lotion all over. There's also some devices that have a little bit of user interface on the device itself. Sometimes that takes the form in fingerprint scanners of a couple LEDs. Some of them have a little bit more advanced, smaller screens on them. And that can give you cues of like, did that read properly? Yes or no? Do I need to redo it? Right? And that's handy for when the scannee is interacting with the device but cannot see the software screen, right? And the operator typically does not share that screen in most instances. So they don't know, hey, did that work? Did that not work? And it just helps them get a little friendly cue. And then that brings us to the other side of the coin, which is the software. And the software is where that operator is going to be viewing it directly. They're going to get a lot more insight into success or failure, needing to redo. And if it passes the integrated quality checks, which most modern software have, to make sure that the record doesn't get rejected when it's submitted to the database further on down the line. But that interface in general is still quite dated, in my opinion. If you look at modern UX design and UI standards, even in the last 5-10 years, they've come a very long way. And a lot of these software that people are interacting with could be 20 years old plus, especially in some of these larger portfolios that purchase devices earlier in the years, I would say. But yeah, so I'd say that it's divided in those two sections, and current status not so good, but that just means we have a lot of room for improvements, and that's actually hopefully a big focus moving forward in a lot of these companies.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, from these customers' perspective, it is a challenge to when to upgrade these devices, because obviously that they are sensitive of disrupting their normal operations versus upgrading. So I can imagine that this is a constant challenge for these customers.
Yeah, and a lot of these softwares, they're very customized, they're very expensive to deploy, very expensive to replace. So, getting that budget approved again, in sometimes a relatively short time period can be very difficult for a lot of organizations and companies.
That makes sense. And in your opinion, and a follow-up to this one, like, is there like a consensus around what's a good solution to address these UX challenges?
Well, I would say now, currently, it's training. It's really that human element, working directly with customer support agents or working directly with on-site trainers is the way that we're, as an industry in live scan, conquering those problems. Now, if you were to say that to a lot of modern SaaS companies, that you need to send somebody on site to train your customers, they probably laugh at you. So I think that this is not sustainable for the long term, and I think that's why I said a lot of companies now are really starting to focus on the idea of improving that user experience to make it more intuitive, so it requires less training, and therefore just better overall experience for both parties involved, the person being enrolled and the operator of the software.
That makes sense. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Moving on, Matthew, one topic that is related to biometric recognition systems I often get asked about is the difference between on-prem and cloud system deployments. Could you please provide an explanation for the audience on what these deployments entail and what sets them apart?
Yeah. So, most commonly early in the digital revolution of biometric capture, right? We're talking about going from ink and fingers on a piece of paper to a digital scanner. Those earlier ones were, glass prism and things like that. Those were all done on premise, right? Back when those were initially deployed, there was no public cloud. There was no easy access to that type of resource. So anytime, say, a company would sell a live scan software, they would also sell a PC, a computer that would go in a kiosk typically, all in one nice package. If you're dealing with a rather professional company, they're going to include a scanner. They're going to include any biometric scanning devices you might need. So fingerprints or facial recognition or iris scanners. They're going to include that PC, a keyboard, a monitor, a kiosk to hold it all, and everything should be plug and play when it shows up. So that was kind of the way things were. I would say in the last 5-ish years or so, we're starting to see a lot more cloud deployments. And when I say cloud, that doesn't necessarily mean that you have like a Bluetooth fingerprint scanner, right? That's not what we're talking about here. What we are talking about is removing that reliance on that exact PC. What we're talking about is the ability to open up your live scan software, in this case, on any computer you wish, and plugging in that device and being ready to enroll. So use cases for this, is really, really beneficial for the users when they're in a mobile enrollment scenario. We've seen quite a few times where governments or whatever have set up enrollment stations, right? Because they don't have enough funds to deploy live scans in every police station or every post office, which is typically the more common route here in the United States. We still have several rural areas that maybe have one live scan for 500 miles, right? So they want to be able to bring it to a specific location. But so this enables that modality. It also enables you to send just the scanners. So if, for example, all we're doing is a fingerprint scan, those scanners can range, a couple $1,000s and down, but it's still a lot cheaper than $10,000 for an entire system. So you could potentially disperse many of those over a wider area, and so lots of benefits for the customer. But what we're also seeing is a lot of concern for security, right? And rightfully so. Biometrics is what I call the ultimate PII, right? Forget your social security number, forget your driver's license number. If somebody has access to duplicating your fingerprints and your irises, that's game over, right? Yeah. So this is the ultimate in security that we are deploying, right? We're held to extremely high standards. NIST has several publications that we follow. CGIS has several as well. And so, how do we bring those security requirements to the cloud, right? And luckily for us, Amazon, Google, they've started to see, there's lots of applications for government, very high security work, and they've deployed several cloud environments that are approved. And so that is one of the options for people making new biometric software to just use GovCloud, AWS GovCloud to be specific, or they can go for FedRAMP certification themselves. What technically I don't think it's called a certification, but they can get FedRAMP approved. I think that's what it is, and or they could try to adhere to NIST 800-53, maybe a medium level or low level, which is one of those security standards I mentioned earlier, and have that independently audited and verified. That's probably not the route I would recommend because it's just very time consuming, but so lots of options nowadays. And so now we're seeing lots of companies and public agencies say, okay, well, they've got the security down. This has been deployed, in California, it's been deployed in New Jersey. We trust this now. So people are coming more on board with using the cloud in these highly secure environments. The other thing I think is really related to the pricing and the billing models, but maybe we should stop there and we can move to that topic later for you.
Thank you. Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, for customers who are especially like startups and who have some resource issues, cloud seems like certainly in phase one, kind of easier step one to have their system up and running by following obviously the best practices from AWS and all these cloud providers and working with some of these industry bodies to have their system certified and approved. I think that could be an easy route or an easier plan to get the systems up and running.
Absolutely. Yeah, you skip a ton of steps on infrastructure and security requirements if you just simply deploy an AWS GovCloud. So save a lot of time, save initial investment. You end up paying for it over time, though. AWS, they do make their money somehow.
I see. That makes sense. Got it. Okay. So as we come to an end of this section, Matthew, I would like to touch upon a topic that frequently arises from product teams, and you also touched upon very recently. It's about pricing, the pricing of the biometric recognition system. Would you kindly provide an overview of the pricing models commonly utilized in the industry that you have come across?
Yeah, so I can't speak to all of my competitors out there, but for example, when we were at Idemia, we had kind of our legacy systems was, of course, in government procurement chains. This is done through RFPs, RFBs, things like that. And these are kind of a one-time purchase, if I might put it that way. They would say spend $10,000, $15,000 per live scan unit, and then that would be delivered, and they own that unit. They own it outright. They also own the software that goes in the unit as well. So what we would then see is that they would run into problems. So the scanners would have connection issues, or a monitor would die, or the keyboard tray would get broken on the cabinet, or something would go end of life. I don't know, right? It could be anything, and they would call us and say, hey, we need help. We don't know how to fix this thing. And so that's where the maintenance contracts were born. So every year then there would be a maintenance contract that's signed between the parties, typically on a yearly basis, like I mentioned, and that would enable them to have their choice of level of support. So 24-hour support, 5-day-a-week support. I don't know if there's a lower tier anymore, but you get the idea. So they would have that large upfront purchase and then have a smaller yearly maintenance contract that goes along with it. So that's kind of the older model. That still gets done quite a bit and can still be done for a cloud deployment. The transferring of the computing power off-site does not necessarily change the billing model. Now, what it does change, though, is give you another option. You don't have to take the option, but it does open it up. And that's kind of your more typical SaaS industry-wide billing, which would be that monthly or annual purchase. And that's more of an idea of you're renting the software. You're renting your space in the software ecosystem. So what that typically would entail is that you'd have a commitment of 1 year, and you'd pay for the software, the hardware, and the maintenance all in one price. And then when that year is up, you would then either return your hardware, purchase your hardware, but you would lose access to the software entirely. So that's kind of that more common billing model we're seeing for other services, right? Like Jira or Zoom or whatever kind of software you're using. So that's kind of the key differences between the two different types of billing that I'm seeing out there for the live scan services.
Got it. Got it. So I agree with you that the trend is more towards a more simplified single pricing based, pricing that is easier to manage, and you don't have to manage pricing for X piece and second piece and third module. It's easy to club all these into one pricing, single pricing. Yeah, awesome. Thank you for sharing that, Matthew. I mean, with this, we have finished the round 2 of our episode. And moving on to my favorite section, which is rapid fire. I normally ask my guests some general questions about biometrics. The idea here is this will give the audience the opportunity to hear different perspectives from different experts. So I wanted to make sure if you are ready for this, Matthew.
Yeah, it sounds fun.
Awesome. So my first question, as always, is how would you explain biometrics to someone who is either is a 10-year-old kid or is not aware of what biometrics is?
Man, so I haven't given this a lot of thoughts, but I think that biometrics at its core level is what makes you unique, right? Every person has a unique combination of physical characteristics. So I'd say if you look at your hands, you look at your eyes, you look at your mouth, your nose, and you compare yourself to, the person next to you, right? All of those things that are different, that make you unique, are what make up your biometric signature. Yeah. And so by taking and kind of cataloging all of those things, say, in my case, I have brown hair, I have hazel eyes, I have kind of a round face, right? Taking all these things and writing them down can give you a number of data points that you can then verify against later and say, does this meet all of these things we expect from Matthew? And if yes, then that's your biometric verification. I hope that was simple enough. It's yeah.
I really like that definition, actually. Explaining it to kids, it's like, hey, look at your hands, look at your eyes, look at your other physical features. I mean, and you have your friends in the class, you see the differences. So that's what makes us unique, these physical or behavioral characteristics. Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you for sharing that. Next one is, can you suggest a biometric conference either in the US or abroad that would provide valuable insights into the latest advancements in the biometrics field?
Yeah, definitely. And that's an easy one. I actually hosted it when I was working at, well, not the entire conference, but hosted the live scan portion of it. And that's the Idemia annual users conference. Idemia has I believe, #1 matching algorithms for both face and fingerprints nowadays. They do get stiff competition, so it rotates, and they'll get #2, they'll get #1, but they are top of the line. And they also have some of the best hardware, especially for fingerprints. They have, palm print devices that are sought out by almost every manufacturer in the world. Their fingerprint devices, there's a lot more competition, so those can come and go, but they're still very, very high quality, very nice. And so, they have both. They have the hardware and the software, and you combine that with, over 15,000 global employees. We're talking about the biggest biometrics portfolio in the United States, quite possibly in the world. You might have to talk to the global product manager to get the right answer on that one. But, they've got the industry experience, they've got the experts, they've got the hardware, they've got the software. I think that's really the place to go. You're not going to see a lot of competitors, though, right? You're not going to see the latest and greatest from, Biometrics for All or anybody like that. But you're definitely going to see some really amazing technology, including their contactless fingerprint systems, which I don't know the latest on it because I've been on the loop a little bit, but I think they're the only ones on the market that are really doing anything with that. So very cool technology.
Amazing. Is that open to general public? And at what time of the year that conference is generally?
Ooh, now that I couldn't tell you. I don't know if it's invite only or if it's public access. I'm sorry about that. There is information on the website. They publicize it pretty well. So quick jot over the website, and you should be able to find everything you need.
Great. Yeah, we will definitely provide that link in the description. Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. My last question in this section is, if you had the opportunity to start your biometrics journey again, how do you think it would differ from your current experience?
Yeah, so that's really hard to say. I think as I've gotten further into biometrics, I've learned more about the government market. And it's really interesting the things that we could do in the government market versus the private market. I think that the private market is smaller, yes, and it has some really important missions that they're taking care of, right? The Federal Reserve, uses our live scan software, right? And you definitely want to have the fingerprints and biometrics of somebody who is manufacturing the US dollar. Very, very important to the world, okay? But that being said, the scale that governments can deploy, and as you mentioned, Aadhaar's massive scale, I believe is 1.2 billion people have now been enrolled. That kind of impact is, for a product manager, right? That's something we're all looking for. So yeah. I think that if I were to do this again, I would probably veer more towards that government side. And I say that because my section of LiveScan is physically cut from some of the secret clearance deployments. So I would probably go to that side. You're working with a lot of the three-letter agencies in the United States, for example, and in other governments, right, with more of their classified information. I just find that the technology that's going into those areas is mind-blowing. It is amazing technology. And that is something I definitely love to be a part of if I could do it again. But I'm not saying that I didn't enjoy my time. I really do enjoy the kind of public safety and the private corporations and things like that I have worked with.
Yeah, totally. And my experience is exactly opposite. Like I have been more mainly focused on in the private sector, and I never get a chance to work on the government side. So I can totally imagine that they work with all the government bodies and standards and have the scale to look into different aspects of the system implementation. So absolutely relate to what you said. Awesome. That brings us to the end of this episode. Matthew, thank you so much for your time. One question is what is the best way for companies or individuals to engage with you? Are you on social media, or would you prefer an email? What is the best way for folks to reach out to you?
Definitely the best way is LinkedIn. I'm very active there. I love making new connections and chatting with people, and that's definitely the easiest way. It's MKNOOT is my last name, is my handle. But yes, happy to make any connections that people are interested in biometrics or in product management as in a general discipline as well.
Awesome. We'll provide your LinkedIn profile in the description as well. Thank you so much. And again, Matthew, the information and the practical knowledge that you shared, I hope that is very valuable and useful for the audience. So again, I want to thank you for all your time and contributions to the biometric community. And for the audience, if you enjoyed this episode and wish to stay on top of future ones, kindly like and subscribe to my podcast. The link can be found in the description. Thank you and have a wonderful day ahead. Thank you, everyone.